following program is exclusively produced and distributed by Dick Dinman's Double D Productions, Inc., all rights reserved. Hi, Golden Age film fanatics, and welcome to DVD Classics Corner on the Air. My name is Dick Dinman, and our goal is to become your exclusive guide to the very best of the Golden Age classics coming out on DVD. We'll have reviews, breaking news of upcoming releases, plenty of surprise guests, and a special feature devoted to the great Golden Age film composers, which we call Cinemusic. So let's turn on the marquee and lights, camera, action. It's time for Dick's Picks, in which I get to shine the spotlight on one of my Dick's Picks of the week. Our friends at Kino Lorber continue to let the good times roll, with 3 classic releases certain to please all stripes of classic cinema lovers. First, there's Play It Again, Sam, which is funnier than ever, and which is a gift to not only Woody Allen fans, but fans of Diane Keaton and, wait for it, the great Humphrey Bogart, no less. Then there's the latest Kino Lorber Film Noir collection, number 23, which includes the riveting sand-swept saga of savage greed, sultry love, and wild adventure in Rope of Sand, in which Burt Lancaster heads a cast that includes 3 Casablanca stars, Paul Henreid, Claude Rains, and Peter Lorre. Then there's James Cagney's brutal and twisted follow-up to White Heat, entitled Kiss Tomorrow Goodbye. And finally, there's Harold Robbins' Never Love a Stranger, which has an early performance by Steve McQueen. Finally, how can we possibly forget the ludicrously entertaining The Conqueror, in which John Wayne attempts to play Mongol warrior Genghis Khan to absolutely hysterical effect. Play It Again, Sam, Film Noir Collection number 23, and The Conqueror are now available from Kino Lorber, even as we speak. Stay tuned for more Dick's Picks, coming up on DVD Classics Corner on the Air very soon. Some might argue that the commentary track on the Conqueror Blu-ray with film historian David Del Valle and film historian and producer Dan Marino is more entertaining than the feature itself, and, well, I'm not prepared to debate that point, but suffice to say, Dan Marino is my guest today, and all is well with the world. Dan Marino, welcome to DVD Classics Corner on the Air. It's especially wonderful to have you on the show because your commentary and David Del Valle's commentary on The Conqueror is, dare I say, occasionally more entertaining than the movie itself. And it was a wonderful sit, and both you guys obviously did a lot of research, and the presentation was perfect, and I couldn't be happier to have you on the show.
Well, Dick, thank you so much for having me. And yes, I think you put me in a rather unfortunate situation to say that my commentary may arguably have been more entertaining than the film itself. But while I deeply appreciate the compliment, I think what I can say about the film is that it is in a sense a fascinating and interesting film, but not the kind that unfortunately is very enjoyable to sit through at all times. I think that the mere fact of its existence is a very interesting discussion point, and it certainly has a very interesting history. But
well, let me tell you about my history with the Conqueror. I think it was 1955 when I saw it second run at the RKO Kenmore in Brooklyn with my English teacher. And the moment that John Wayne came on and said his first line, my English teacher was practically on the floor. He was laughing so hard, and I was 13 or 14, and anything with horses and battles and all of that at that time was enough to keep me engaged. But quite a few years ago, I believe it was a outfit named Artisan who put the picture on Blu-ray, just on DVD, without anamorphic treatment, and I simply couldn't watch it. But Dan, I have found the perfect way to watch this movie, and I'll tell you what I came up with. First time I watched 35 minutes one evening. I said, that's it. And then I watched another 35 minutes the following evening. And by the time I got to the third evening, and this will tell you how demented I am, I actually enjoyed it.
It sounds like it came to be like a sort of piece of music you grew to be very familiar with around the house or something.
Absolutely. What is your assessment of the movie?
Well, my assessment of the film is, it's fascinating how things like this sort of come to be. But as a sort of artifact, if you want to call it that, of the time, there is a lot, as I said, that is very interesting about how it came to be and kind of what it represented for RKO and Howard Hughes himself, and to some extent what it represented in the career of John Wayne. But it does have the reputation of being a sort of notoriously kind of awful film. But I think there are a lot of those that there is a lot within them that can be fun and enjoyable to watch. I think, unfortunately, this film it does not have a lot of those enjoyably bad qualities that many of those other films I could think of come to mind. So in that sense, I think that the viewers should be cautioned, but it's certainly something worth seeing. As a viewer of cinema history, I think it's kind of something that, everyone should probably try to sit through at least once, just to kind of get the knowledge and experience of kind of where the Hollywood epic can kind of go a little bit astray.
Well,
kind of what that suggests.
Okay, it's become increasingly evident that I'm going ever deeper into my dotage, but my overall, I have seen many, many movies that I just simply could not watch. And by the time I got to the third night, I was enjoying it. In fact, that day I was even anticipating the comparative pleasure of seeing the last third. Now there is a legend about this film. There are many legends, actually, but the primary one is that the film was filmed near St. George, Utah, downwind from a nuclear testing range in Nevada. And it's also true that toxic red sands were transported back to the studio interior. And the legend is that this film caused the cancer rates of so many stars in the movie and crew and supporting players. But I have to tell you, I did a little deep research and found that the only principal who never smoked and never drank was Agnes Moorehead, who eventually got cancer at I think in the mid-70s or so. But these people were smoking 2 to 3 packs of unfiltered cigarettes a day. Hello? I mean, come on.
No, I think you're very right to point that out. In preparing for the film, I did a sort of, because you're correct to say that is the legend that surrounds this, and doesn't just surround it now in the sort of wake of the film's place in history. This was sort of something that was evident to many of the people who were in the film at the time. In fact, Howard Hughes expressed a lot of guilt and remorse about it during this, while he was still alive, as did many of the stars of it. But as you point out rightly, there were a great many people in this film that smoke and drank quite a bit, and it's not actually immediately obvious, or one can't in fairness say that there's ever really been a proven connection between any of the cancer and where they filmed that, because it was actually somewhat commensurate with the cancer rates among the general population, is the amount of crew members that got it.
That's right.
That's right. So it would be hard to say that to any degree of certainty. What I would say, though, and I think this is actually worth noting, and I would urge people, if they have an interest in it, to look it up. There are a couple documentaries that I was able to discover in my research about a phenomenon called downwinders, which is essentially people that lived in many of these nuclear testing sites or nuclear fallout areas in Arizona, in New Mexico, and in Utah, of which they say this was filmed relatively close to. I can say in that case, from the evidence that they have brought up, that for the people that lived much more adjacent to the sites, there does seem to be some evidence to suggest that the sickness rates and the cancer rates are precipitously higher than the general population. And they're very fascinating subjects. Again, a proven link isn't there. The government did acknowledge a degree of responsibility for it and had compensated people who live nearby there. So there is some acknowledgement that this phenomenon is not just kind of something that's, completely pulled from out of the blue where there's nothing to it, because there certainly are areas of the country where it's proven that living close to this or being close to it might have done it. But these are people that lived there, were born and raised there, drank the water there for many, many years, even decades. I don't know that maybe that phenomenon could extend to a brief period of filming a movie for only a few months. But we can't say it with any type of definition either way. It certainly is the legend, and it sort of adds to the overall legend of the hubris of this film in general.
Right. Well, Wayne later said, quote, "Don't make an ass of yourself trying to play parts you're not suited for," unquote. And, and this film, which actually made money, though not enough to save RKO, this film did, as I said, did very well at the box office, but it had a rather devastating effect on John Wayne's career, because that year, The Searchers was released, and it did well, but it was not terrific. It was not a huge box office film. And then Wayne went on to do Jet Pilot was released a year later, which frankly makes the Conqueror look like Citizen Kane.
Right, yeah.
But that flopped terribly. Legend of the Lost flopped terribly. Barbarian and the Geisha flopped horribly for 20th Century Fox. And Wayne's comeback was Rio Bravo in, I think, 1959. And I always thought that Rio Bravo was a huge hit. And Angie Dickinson corrected me, and she said it did okay, but it was not that big. And then came The Horse Soldiers, which lost tremendous amount of money. And we know that The Alamo was a total disaster for Wayne. And amazingly, he rebounded from about 1960 to True Grit, with solid box office successes. But I maintain The Conqueror very much hurt his career initially. Would you agree with that?
I think there's a very strong case to make there. I think that you would be certainly onto something. I mean, you're very correct to identify that it was certainly, I would say, that a big contributing factor to the nail in the coffin of RKO. And in preparing again for the commentary, I did a bit of a deep dive into the financial elements. And Howard Hughes was a notorious individual, a legendary sort of individual, and he was very adept at one thing in particular, and that was making money and turning money into money.
Yeah.
And his tenure of RKO in a creative sense is, I think it would be fair to say, is not viewed with a very positive light in the modern era. I mean, the studio fired a great many people. It reduced to about half of its normal output. The quality of the films were not particularly high during his tenure. And it was, most of it was characterized by a kind of battle for financial and creative control, actually, that was ongoing while he was trying to helm the studio. And at the time that he eventually owned the whole entire studio, he actually sold it off for about the number he bought it for to another company almost immediately, and did something which was very smart for him but very bad for the studio, which is he got to retain many of the box office rights for the films that had yet to be released. So essentially, the studio that bought it, or rather, I think it was the Gas and Electric Company that bought it for not a great price, and then he retained much of the money, or a good portion of the money that came from the box office success, and yet the studio still had to pay to promote it. Mm-hmm. So that film and the films that carried over the slate were the things that really sunk RKO, because they quite simply couldn't support financially the burden of releasing those films and not getting the box office returns they'd hoped for. And as far as Wayne's career is concerned, I think you make a very strong case there. What we can say about it is that, I think that, to his credit, while there was much, I think, that appealed to him about the project early on, it was even before production began that he began to have severe doubts about whether or not he would be good in the role, if this was a good idea, and almost immediately into production, he sort of expressed some regret for having done the project at all. But, if there was one thing John Wayne was known for, is that he was, he had a reputation of being a very stand-up guy, a very hard worker, the first to get there, the last to leave. And, if he gave his word that a film was going to be made, he would show up every day and try to do his best in the way he knew how. So, he carried it through, but there's a lot of evidence that he was aware of the poor nature of the choice almost immediately in the production,
Right. Well, we are going to go to a quick station break, and we'll be right back with Dan Marino.
We pause now for station identification.
DVD Classics Corner on the Air is exclusively produced and released by Dick Dinman's Double D Productions, Inc. All rights reserved. And we're back with Dan Marino. And look, I will say, I will admit, I did, when watching the film, I did feel my brain cells diminishing somewhat. But, again, I found a way to enjoy it.
To enjoy it, right,
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Well,
The thing that bothered me about the movie more than anything else, frankly, were the horse falls. I mean, there were so many of them, and I guarantee you that some of those horses broke legs, broke their neck. That to me was one of the biggest downers in watching it, because I love animals so much.
I think for anyone that does, I mean, I can understand your feelings completely, and I think it's fortunate that we live, in a time where there is a great deal more sensitivity given to animals than was the case in Hollywood at that time.
Oh, yeah.
The film is not scoring high watermarks in terms of sensitivity in its portrayal of much of anything, unfortunately. But it's, I think there's two things about it I do think I would have to say, and this is why I would say it is very much worth a view. One, which I have to say I was surprised about, but is the case, is that the little bit we actually do know about Genghis Khan's actual life, and mind you, I think I mentioned in the commentary there's a very good film called Mongol, which is a sort of Russian, Asian co-production, that actually chronicles the rise of Genghis Khan very well, and it's probably the best film about him, I would say, because it's a subject matter that's been adapted quite a bit. But what I would say that is surprising, and this would be very surprising, I think, to the viewer, is that the central plot line of The Conqueror does actually sort of mirror what is known to be his origin story, at least as far as we know it. The names are pulled from it, Temujin, and as funny as it is to hear John Wayne say all of those names in his, but it is actually somewhat close to what we know. There was, he did fall in love with a woman, and the Susan Hayward character. He did get into this warring feud with the different tribes, partly over her, and he did emerge eventually victorious.
You mean that's the truth?
Well, at least insofar as we know, most of what we know about the life of Genghis Khan comes from a couple different sources. One is a book called The Secret History of the Mongols, which was translated in Chinese. So there could, much later after the fact. And then the other is a book that's also lost called The Golden Book. And that was also only known through much later Chinese translations. And then there are some Persian accounts of him conquering, Mm-hmm. But other than that, that's all we really have is a historical record. And believe it or not, that aspect of the story does seem to mirror what seems to be what we know about the origin story of Genghis Khan, shockingly. It's actually not as Hollywoodized as one might imagine.
I'll tell you who my favorite Genghis Khan is, and that's Orson Welles, who camped it up very entertainingly in a Tyrone Power film called The Black Rose. And Universal got into the act in the early 50s with a movie called The Golden Horde of Genghis Khan with Ann Blyth and David Farrar. And that was just a typical Universal Technicolor quickie. So there's certainly our country has never done a truly creditable film about Genghis Khan, and I think it should be done because I think it would be really, really fascinating, and hopefully it would not have lines like You're beautiful in your wrath.
In your wrath, Temujin.
Yeah.
Exactly. You're right.
And wait a minute. Wait, this is a wonderful one. The way Wayne says it. I feel this Tartar woman is for me. I mean, I love it. I love it.
Yes, he had quite a delivery. I can't remember what was the film off the top of my head where he was it was the biblical story, and
oh my God! Yeah, I heard a story about that, which I don't believe, and you probably heard it. I don't know. I don't think Wayne was a stupid man. Supposedly, and Wayne was there for one day as a Roman centurion, and he only has one line where he looks up at Christ on the cross and says, truly he is the Son of God. And so George Stevens supposedly said to Wayne, okay, let's do a take. And Wayne went, truly he is the Son of God.
Truly he is the Son of God.
And George Stevens said, supposedly, Duke, if you could just give it a little more awe, that would be wonderful. Gotcha, J.S. Okay, take two. Oh, truly he is the Son of God. Now, I do not believe that, but it's supposedly a friend of mine spoke to the other actor who was on the cross, who maintained that this really happened.
It's hard to know, but it really could be the case. I mean, it is kind of hard to believe. Look, I feel like I also have to say, just because we have in this, probably in the discussion about this, given John Wayne a bit of a hard time, but I think the truth is that he was, I have to say, one of the great stars, one of the most successful stars of the period, and I think actually
no question,
a very good actor, just one that was not one that had a great deal of range, but there are a great many performances where I think he delivers incredible and excellent performances. I think, as you point out, this is a great testament to the overreach of an actor to try and go, outside of their wheelhouse and what can happen when they do.
Yeah.
But he was a tremendous actor and a tremendous star, and when he was good in a film, he was really tremendously compelling. And
well, I'll give you an example of where he was superb, and people don't bring it up, but I've watched the film many times because I think in many ways it's his most sensitive performance, and that is in Otto Preminger's In Harm's Way. I mean, he is phenomenal in that.
No, he's excellent in that. I agree with you. That's a great example. I also usually cite The Quiet Man as well, which I think
sure.
He's fantastic in. He was a very, very good actor. And, I often say this, and I say it frequently about genre films, because, I think that there can be a lot of value in films from a sociological perspective, and then sometimes very unintentionally, even if a director or a writer isn't in control of the vision or what they're trying to say, sometimes things can kind of happen by happenstance. And I think one of the reasons this film really does hold a fascination with the public, I frequently say it has to do with, it sort of represents, almost in the way that one might stumble upon the remains of an ancient city in South America, like a Mayan city.
Yeah.
The film is kind of an artifact to the idea of hubris itself, because you have so many different overlapping facets of hubris, right? You have the hubris of Howard Hughes trying to be the first sole owner of RKO since the silent era and kind of remaking that and choosing this film in particular to be a flagship, thinking that he could be the one to adapt a historical epic as a prestige piece of Genghis Khan. You have John Wayne also looking at it as an opportunity to perhaps get some kind of, prestige glory for a versatile, out-of-the-box performance. You have, indeed, the hubris of filming so close to an area in the desert that was a nuclear testing site, and indeed the nuclear testing site itself, which is, if anyone has just seen Oppenheimer, which has come out in the past couple of years, there's a lot of hubris to be discussed there, and us doing that. And, you could even bring it all the way back to Genghis Khan himself if you wanted, because, his whole life story, though a very compelling one, and we know little about it, though, is a man's attempt to kind of, control and order the known world, and while he exceeded at it and excelled at it in a way that only few have, he certainly did not fully succeed in conquering the world and everything.
Right.
And so the film, whether intentional or not, sort of feels like this sort of great ode to hubris, if you will.
Well, I mean, it got horrific reviews. The funniest maybe Time magazine, with the headline, "It never wanes, but it bores."
Oh my God!
and what they said about John Wayne, quote, "John Wayne plays the great conqueror as a cross between a square-shooting sheriff and a Mongolian idiot."
Oh dear.
But there's one actor, and one actor alone, who survives this movie totally, because somehow he manages to make every line work. Nothing that he does is risible, and this is an actor who I have not sufficiently appreciated, but now I think he's one of the greats. Do you know who I'm talking about?
I could guess.
Yeah?
You wouldn't be referring to, well, no, I think you should go, because I could say a few right now, but
no.
I mean...
no, for me, it was Pedro Armendáriz.
I was about to say Pedro Armendáriz. I should have just gone. Oh my goodness! I should have gone with my instinct.
Well, we're running rapidly out of time, and before we go, Dan, is there anything, any projects, any new commentaries, anything that you have coming up that we can salute?
Well, I think it would be most appropriate probably to salute this commentary itself, as I believe Kino Lorber has only just released the DVD, or I think has shortly just released it for The Conqueror. So I would urge everyone, despite the seeming shellacking we kind of give the film, there is a lot about it that is very much worth seeing and is fascinating to film historians. And, I do urge people to see it and educate themselves. It is a very interesting testament to where Hollywood kind of can go astray. So I hope people pick that up. And, Dick, I really appreciate the chat so much and the opportunity to chat. It's always a pleasure to get to chat about films such as these with people that are as passionate about it as yourself.
Well, Dan, all I can tell you is you've been a phenomenal first-time guest, and I hope this is the beginning of many, many more, because I can't wait to have you back on the show again. And I thank you so much. I know your schedule is very busy. I thank you so much for taking the time to chat about The Conqueror.
Well, it is truly my pleasure, Dick, and I am happy to come back anytime.
Great.
You let me know.
Great. The great news for classic 3D fans is the Kino Lorber 3D release of the 3D Film Archive's masterful 3D transfer of the intriguing murder mystery, The Glass Web, which stars Edward G. Robinson, John Forsythe, and my wonderful friend Kathleen Hughes. Here is a brief audio clip of one of my many recorded interviews with Kathy, as she talks about her unusual experience working with the great Edward G.
You're right where you belong. fooling with your little details. And that's where you'll always be. That's why it's such a pleasure waving you goodbye.
You're not leaving.
You're hurting me.
Starring Edward G. Robinson, who hated Paula, but so did plenty of others. And tantalizing Kathleen Hughes, Hollywood's new discovery. The 3D sensation of It Came from Outer Space.
You don't own me, you know.
No, I don't. Just don't ever hurt me, Paula.
Those were clips of the trailer for the suspense film The Glass Web. And that bad lady you just heard being so mean to Edward G. is in reality one of the nicest ladies you'll find anywhere. Her name is Kathleen Hughes, who I'm proud to say is one of my closest friends, and she's about to shed the light on a particular talent that Edward G. had, which few are aware of. Kathleen Hughes Rubin, welcome to DVD Classics Corner on the Air. It's wonderful to have you as a guest, and what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about one of your most prominent co-stars, Edward G. Robinson.
Wonderful.
Now, you did a film called The Glass Web. You co-starred with Edward G. Robinson in The Glass Web, and this was your second film for, I think, for director Jack Arnold. Am I correct?
Yes, yes.
And it was also your second 3D movie.
Yes, I was Miss 3D of 1953 or maybe 1952. I love 3D.
You didn't have to mention the year.
You can cut it out.
Tell me about your experience working with Edward G. Robinson.
Well, it was just one of the best experiences ever. Of course, I was a big fan of his. I had seen so many of his movies and loved him in all of them. And then when I got to meet him, he was so nice. He was just a joy to work with. He was very nurturing. There was a scene where I had to laugh, but, laughing at him. And I found this very difficult. And I said, well, I'm not quite sure how to do this so that it's not going to sound phony. And he showed me how. I mean, it's, over 50 years since he showed me, but it was just a sort of a breath thing. And he did it for me, and it was very, very helpful. And I thought that was really nice of him.
The rumor is that he was a great kisser. Is this true or is this false?
Oh, no, that is true. I was hoping you would bring it up. I would have brought it up eventually.
Do tell.
I don't know how this came about, but between takes and between scenes, we would sometimes sort of neck in his dressing room on the set.
Whoa.
Now, I must say, the door was open, so, nobody could say that anything too X-rated was going on in there. But he was just so sweet, and it was just like a couple of teenagers kissing. And I loved it. It was just wonderful. He was just such a wonderful actor, and he gave so much. So it was really, really easy, and it was a joy working with him. I mean, I never worried about any of the scenes. I must say, it was hard to look disgusted when he touched me, which I had to do. But it was also fun having to do this because of how much I liked him.
Any other reflections on Edward G. Robinson that...
I'll tell you something that was really, really nice. When the picture was over, or as it was coming to the end of the shoot, again, I can't remember for sure, but he invited the entire cast and crew to his house for dinner. And it was a lovely, lovely dinner party, and we got to tour his art gallery, and we got to tour the house. And I thought that was a really nice thing for him to do. It was a wonderful evening.
I'm very grateful, Kathleen, so grateful for you to appear on the show with me. We've been friends now for at least X amount of years.
Yeah, you're right.
And I'm so glad we finally got together on this show, and much love to you and Stanley.
Oh, well, thank you. And it was a pleasure talking to you, and I love talking about Edward G. Robinson.
Well, and I love listening. Thanks again. Well, that's my show for today. DVD Classics Corner on the Air is conceived, written, produced, and directed by me, Double D. So,
keep well, keep happy, and keep listening.